we could accomplish so much more if we just had a plan, right? The plan might be little. The plan might be, say, $500, but at least you have something you're aiming for. So when the decision comes up with, should I buy this? Well, I have a bigger goal in front of me. I want to get whatever. And, if I knew that this was the trade-off, I might decide on the bigger thing.
Staying motivated takes work. If you don't work on your motivation, you become unmotivated. Join Oumar Jang as he shares inspirational stories and tips to get you motivated to do whatever you need to do. This is the Motivational Voice Podcast.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Motivational Voice Podcast. This is session number 42. Have you ever stopped and asked yourself, am I doing this right? Is there something that I should change in the way that I manage my money? And since you became an adult, have you actually learned, and I mean truly learned, how to use your money? Or have you asked yourself why you use your money the way that you do? My guest today is a money subject matter expert, and she joins me today to talk about positive money habits that are sure to surprise you. And she's also going to share a bit about her story and what she learned from her own experiences with money. Let's bring her into the conversation. Rachel, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Would you take a second and introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us who you are, what you do?
Sure. My name is Rachel Murphy, and my story is, like most young couples, my husband and I, we started out our lives really excited about the future, thinking we were going to do all kinds of great things. And we started a internet service provider. This was back in the 90s.
Wow.
When you had to dial in to the internet.
That with that weird noise in the background.
Yeah, so loud and annoying. And we didn't grow as quick as we thought we would. And it was really expensive, the equipment, all of that back then. And we found ourselves just struggling, and we were surviving off our credit cards. And we ended up selling that business, but along with it, we ended up with $50,000 in debt. Wow. And we determined we were going to pay that off. We didn't know how. We had trouble finding work. My husband went through 3 layoffs in 9 months because this was the time of the dot-com crash. So, we found ourselves no job, in a bunch of debt and, just struggling to survive. And we totally did not believe in ourselves. We had the mentality that we were losers. We can't make anything work. Nothing seems to work for us. We had lost a baby during that time too. So we were just really emotionally, depleted, but we were determined to pay it off. And so we spent 5 years paying that off. We were making less than $30,000 a year, but we managed to pay it off. And we determined that when we had kids, we were going to train them financially to be financially smart with money so that when they grew up and got out on their own, they wouldn't have to struggle like we did. I think a lot of people in our generation, in my generation, they were not taught about money by their parents, or they were not taught in a way that they really could learn it. Their parents may have lectured them or told them don't get into debt, but really they didn't internalize those lessons. And, I think part of it's because money is so taboo, but then part of it is because, our parents' generation here in the US, when they grew up, if they couldn't spend more than they made, they didn't have credit cards growing up. So they didn't have to learn those lessons. So then our generation came along, the first generation that really had access to credit cards. And our parents didn't think, oh, maybe we need to, think more about how we need to teach these kids about credit, because they didn't have to deal with that. So that it wasn't even a thought to them. And so now we have this generation that's grown up and their parents didn't teach them. And now they're becoming parents of teenagers. And I just like you, I have a podcast where we teach teens life and leadership skills. And I just kept asking people, what do you wish you'd had learned as a teenager? And the number one answer people always said was, I wish I had learned about money. And so I'm like, oh, I got a story about that.
Yeah.
So we just started teaching people how we taught our kids. And that's how this all came about.
There's definitely a lot to unpack there. I was listening, but I was also thinking about that having a positive money mindset, right? How do you have a healthy relationship with money? And we'll certainly talk about that. But one question that comes to mind is that, and actually for those who don't know, the dot-com boom or bust period was back in the 2000s. Everyone was creating companies. The internet was booming. And a lot of companies came about, and the stock market was doing very well, but everything just imploded on itself, and a lot of people found themselves in a lot of hurt financially. And it sounds like you were one of those people.
Okay.
Now, talk to me about what it felt like to find yourself in a situation where maybe, you're 50K in debt, you are trying to figure out how you're going to make up that deficit. What are some of the things that you did at first to figure out how to get out of that hole?
Right. Well, we went round and round about whether we should declare bankruptcy or not. Like, it was a major topic of conversation many, many times. And we have an agreement in our house. If one of us doesn't feel right about something, we don't do it. So Keith had made an appointment, my husband, to go talk to the attorney. We were heading that way because we just didn't see a way out. And so I really relate to people that are in that situation, because it is very stressful on your marriage, and you feel very hopeless when you feel like you don't have a way out. And he came to me, and I'm just like, I just don't feel right about it. I don't know, I don't know what we're going to do, but I just don't feel right about it. And he's like, okay, we're not going to go through with it then. And so it is kind of like when you don't know how you're going to do something, but you make the decision to do it, and a way finds itself, and it wasn't an easy way. It was really, really hard for a lot of years. He drove a taxi for 6 years, just because he felt, the mindset, he felt like he could not get back into IT because he got rejected so many times,
Wow.
So we lived in a really bad neighborhood.
And this was rejected. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but this was got rejected from job offers, jobs that he applied to? Okay.
Job offers. And then there was just no job offers out there for a long time. And he just kind of gave up and quit looking. And so, we were living on a taxi income, which was not much. We made less than $30,000 the average in that 5-year period where we were digging out. So we were pretty frugal. We lived in a pretty bad neighborhood. We bought a car that cost $1,500, and it was a stick shift. And I really couldn't drive a stick shift, but I needed a car. Yeah, I needed a car. So I learned how to drive that pretty fast.
Yeah.
We didn't go out much. We were really frugal with how we cooked. It was just a period. And I think the things like that, when you go through hard situations like that, the thing that makes it possible is, it is only a season, right? If I had to think like this is going to be the rest of my life, which sometimes it did feel like that, but this will eventually end.
Right.
And that gives you hope,
Yeah, that's a good point. In that when you're going in the tough situation, it feels like, it's like that quote that's overused, when you're going through hell.
Right.
Sometimes you just want to give up.
Don't stop.
And burn, but you really shouldn't stop. You should keep going, right?
Right.
So I'm hearing a few things. Frugality, you made some decisions in terms of, okay, how do we get out of this situation? And someone who's listening and who might be in the same situation and who's having issues with money, and maybe even money is a sore discussion point in their relationship and is about to ruin everything because when you bring it up, it causes fights.
Right.
What advice would you give to them in terms of some of the things they should prioritize? I think we talked about, being frugal, we're basically talking about living within your own means. But what are some of those maybe 2 to 3 things that they absolutely must focus on to get out of this situation?
I'm in a totally different place now than I was back then. And if I could give advice to my former self, I would say work on your mindset. That will totally change everything. It doesn't matter where your income is, you can, if your mind is right, you can get, you can make leaps and bounds in your career, in your, financial life. Because we were trapped by our mind for a long time. Like we just had given up,
In what way? That you believe that you weren't good enough or you couldn't make it?
Yeah, kind of like just existing, which I think is where a lot of people are. Like, this is as good as it's going to get. Let's just get used to it, like not seeking to improve, not seeking what classes could I take, who could I surround myself with to improve my life. Nowadays, back then, we didn't have all the resources we have now. There are so many podcasts out there. If I had to do it again, I would listen to podcasts nonstop. And just because I just know what it has done for me in the last few years. When I discovered podcasts, I was like, what? There's like this whole like free universe of education right here that I can use to learn about anything pretty much. There's a podcast for pretty much any subject you need,
Very true.
Yeah. So I would just focus on what do I need to do to get out? Like, do you need more education? Do you need a better circle of people around you? Can you join any groups, that you can network with? Where can you put yourself to help improve your situation? Because where you are now does not mean you're going to be there forever.
Yeah. So does this mean that they would basically have to set some some goals, some concrete goals in terms of, okay, we're here right now, things are going bad, but looking forward 6 months from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, what are some of the steps that we need to take to get out of this, really? And really executing on those goals. Is that what we're thinking?
Yeah, goals make a huge difference. Like, so many people don't set goals or have them in their head and never write them down. And I feel like, we could accomplish so much more if we just had a plan, right? The plan might be little. The plan might be, say, $500, but at least you have something you're aiming for. So when the decision comes up with, should I buy this? Well, I have a bigger goal in front of me. I want to get whatever. And, if I knew that this was the trade-off, I might decide on the bigger thing because I have it in my mind. But if I'm thinking, oh, it's just a little $5 item, if I had known all of these $5 items would add up to me not getting this, then, it just helps you keep focused.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because that latte doesn't seem like much of an expense, but when you add it up over 30 days, 6 months, it turns into hundreds and potentially thousands over time.
Right. And it's not, I'm not against getting a latte if I know what I'm going towards, right? We're not anti-latte. I know a lot of people, that poor David Bach and his latte factor, everybody jumps on him. But it's one thing if like for me, making a budget and having sinking funds, like I have this is set aside for something later. This is how much I need for these categories. It takes away the guilt when I buy something fun for me because I know the categories have money in them, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people just kind of spend. There's money in the account, so I'll just spend, and they don't think about, well, later I'm going to have the rent payment. You can spend guilt-free if you know where your money's going.
Yeah, that's a good point. How much does having a budget have to do with managing money well?
Right. Budget. I use the word budget a lot myself, but it sounds so confining. I think of more like a spending plan. This is how I'm going to spend my money. If you don't know where it's going, then in anything, if you don't know where you're at and where you're going, then how will you get where you're going? It's like I'm going to go on a trip I really want to go on a trip, but I have no map. I don't know how long it's going to take to get there. I have, no budget for where I'm going. If you don't have a plan, you'll never get where you want to go. You'll end up somewhere, maybe on the other side of the, US instead of,
Right.
I was trying to go to Atlanta, but I'm over here in LA because I just got in the car and started driving. I didn't look at the map. I didn't look at the directions. I didn't have any kind of plan. And then it will end up costing you way more than you ever thought it would. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. For those who want to, maybe they've been working for a while now, they're starting to see stable income, and they want to perhaps build a future. And talking about those foundations about money and really building down that foundation that allows you to really reach and buy the things that you want to buy. What are some things that they would need to do in terms of maybe it's saving money, maybe it's taking some good steps towards those goals? What advice would you give to people to have just a better relationship with, how do you use that money to build that foundation? Getting our mind and our habits right is very important for our well-being. That's one of the reasons why I started this podcast. But taking care of our bodies and especially what we put in it is equally as important. That's why I try to take those gummy vitamins every morning, but I can't for the life of me remember to take them consistently. So I was recently introduced to a better option from Athletic Greens. It's called AG1. When you take AG1, you're getting 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food sourced superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens, and they help you start your day right. This blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, immune system, energy, recovery, focus, and even aging. What's amazing about this product is that it contains less than 1 gram of sugar and has no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or anything artificial, but it still tastes good. And Athletic Greens has over 7,000 5-star reviews. So right now, you can reclaim your health and strengthen your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water daily. That's it. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-boosting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/emerging. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/emerging to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
You think about it, the complaint of pretty much everybody is I don't make enough money, which is a crazy statement if you think about it, because we all make different amounts. We all have different numbers of people in our family. We all live in different parts of the country where the cost of living is different. We all have different size houses. How can everybody have the same problem? And it's because they never learned, how to live within their income. A lot of people say, well, I don't have the money to save. I'll save later. But as a young person, if you can start, from the beginning, pretending you don't have a certain amount of your whole budget, your whole income, say 10%, 10% automatically is forgotten. What if you had gone and gotten that job and they offered you the job, but it was 10% less? Would you have still taken the job? Probably. So just pretend that they were paying you 10% less and I hide that money away,
Yeah.
For a young adult, the big things that I think make a difference is automate as much as you can. So if you can automate your savings to go straight into your 401k or your Roth IRA or whatever, then it becomes something you don't even have to think about. The more times you have to think about something, like if I have to decide every month, I'm going to put this into this account, it becomes a lot harder than if it's automatically taken out of my account. The IRS learned that years ago. They didn't used to take it out of your paycheck automatically. They used to come to you at the end of the year and say you owed it, and nobody ever had the money. But they learned if we take it out every month automatically, we won't have to worry about that. So take a lesson from the IRS.
Yeah, so it's that idea that if it's out of sight, it's basically out of mind. So if you can get that money flowing into whether it's a savings or a checking, whatever,
Right.
an account where the money just goes automatically there before you see your paycheck,
Right.
you are less inclined to hold on to that money and not save it.
Right.
That's
Yes.
that's a good thought. Yeah.
If you take it, if you put it, if you set it up through your work where it's going into your 401k or something like that, what happens if you change your mind? It's a lot of work to go switch that around. So you'll be just like, I'll figure it out, right? I'll
Yeah.
figure it out.
Talking about this, I'm thinking about an article that I read. I think it was a year and a half, or a couple of years ago, about most Americans would be in big trouble or would not be able to pay a $500 emergency bill.
Right.
So the reason I'm bringing this up is in terms of savings. Should people be saving money? Are people saving enough? What we should do? I mean, I know we talked about putting that money aside, sight unseen, but is that enough, or is this a completely separate savings plan to put that money aside so you have money for emergencies when that happens?
Right. Yeah, you should have an emergency fund. Like that would be my first goal. If I was a young person starting out, my first goal would be save my emergency fund. 3 months of expenses would be a good goal, before I started putting money into a 401k that I can't get out if I have an emergency, right? Or a good goal would be, let me just get 1 month ahead of my expenses. A lot of people pay this month's expenses with this month's pay. And then they end up with $2 in their account after they pay their bills. If you could just work a little bit extra, deliver pizzas or, take on a couple extra jobs so that you can get up enough money to be 1 month ahead. And then you start paying this month's expenses with last month's income. That just relieves a lot of the stress of I am living on the edge. I have no margin, and it just gives you a lot more peace. Like I'm not constantly stressed about what if this bill comes out early, or what if I spent more on something than I planned on, or what if my kid has an unexpected expense. It just kind of relieves a lot of the stress, similar to what an emergency fund would do. But if you need something to focus on, say, I just want to get 1 month ahead,
Yeah. Now, one thing I wanted to touch on also was, obviously there are people who are more stable where they are in terms of finances, and there are those who are just maybe beginning. They just graduated from college maybe, and they're becoming adults, and they're moving into their own place. They're starting to really have the freedom of, it's my money, I can do whatever I want. What advice would you give to those in terms of what to watch out for and what to do or not to do?
Yeah, that can be hard, because if you've been used to your parents telling you what to do all the time, and all of a sudden you're free, you have to start adulting.
Yeah.
You are free to do whatever you want, but you have to think about the long term. Do I want to enslave myself to the credit card company for the rest of my life? Or, which is what will happen if you start spending more than you make. You can build a lot of wealth on a middle-class income if you start when you're young, right? Have you ever seen that illustration where the penny doubled?
Yeah.
You have the advantage of time, and if you don't inflate your lifestyle, the lifestyle creep that a lot of people experience, if you start out young, I'm telling my kids, hey, if you can, for your first place you live, buy a duplex, live in one half, rent out the other, and that will pay for most of the mortgage. And then when you're ready, you got a family, you want to move to a bigger house, keep that, rent it. A lot of people, they get I got a new job, and then expenses immediately blow up to meet that job. I got to go get out a new car, a bigger place to live. If you can live simply at the beginning, you can build so much more wealth than if you immediately try to account for all the money. I got to spend it all. You really don't have to.
Yeah.
You really don't have to.
Yeah. And you alluded to the penny doubled. I want to make sure my listeners understand what we're talking about. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit? I know it's about the power of saving and over time and interest.
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly of the numbers, but it was like, would you rather have $1 million right now, or would you rather have a penny doubled every day for 31 days for a month?
Right.
And you would think, oh, a penny doubled, that's not going to account for very much. And it doesn't account for very much like the first 20 so days. But then near the end there, it starts like really getting to large numbers. And you end up with more than $1 million if you take the penny. So a lot of people, they negate the fact that, it's just $5 I'm putting in my savings. It's not that much, but if you did it, consistency is the key in most any good habit you have, whether it be, diet, money, marriage, if you can be a consistent person, you can accomplish a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, no, I can certainly attest to that. I think it was last year, or I was not sure why. I just decided to put, I think it was $50 in a separate account just to see what would happen. Forgot about it. And before I knew it, I went to check my balance, and it was a considerable amount, right? To the point that it paid for Christmas gifts and a lot more, right? So yeah, absolutely. I think that it's good for people to know that just get in the habit of setting money aside and letting that go, right?
Yeah.
Not touching it. That's important because you got to build your financial future. And
a budget. A budget. A lot of people don't realize this, but a budget is not something you do once and then that's it for the year. It is something every month you look at and say, "Oh, what do I have coming up that's different?" It's not, oh, this is the budget, like you spend hours and hours working on it and this is going to last me the rest of my life. No, it's a fluid thing. It's going to change as your life changes. You're going to have unexpected stuff one month that, oh, there's lots of birthdays coming up. I need to start putting more money aside for that. A lot of people, Christmas comes and they're all surprised. Like it didn't come, like they had no plan for it, like it comes every year, right? Yeah. Your car insurance comes, for some people every 6 months, but they don't put the money in the budget for the car insurance. You have to think about these things as you're starting out. It's kind of what we do with our kids. We start our kids when they're 5th and 6th grade. They start handling the budget. We think about, what is something that is important to them, that relates to them, that they would be invested in, and we start turning over. We start when they're really little and it's not much, maybe you buy snacks for your kids at the store. What if you just gave them a monthly amount and said, "Hey, this is your snack money. When it's gone, right?" Or school lunches,
Yeah.
They like buy school lunches. Here, what if you gave them that money at the beginning of the month and they had to manage it? And then if it's out, they got to pack a lunch. It's not hurting them to a large degree to have to pack a lunch, but what if they don't learn those lessons? They get out on their own and it's, $5,000 in unexpected credit card bill because they didn't think about, when this runs out, right? So every year we add more responsibility and they get a higher salary. And by the time they graduate, they're dealing with, 15 categories, they do their own haircuts. Whenever we go out for food, they do that. They do school supplies, they do gasoline, so they get the practice of how do I budget every month for different amounts, but they start small. So it's not overwhelming. And then, they gradually gain confidence and they gradually, have time to ask questions in a safe environment. Because if no one teaches you and then we send you out on your own and you're in college, you're not going to ask your friends because you don't want to look stupid, Right. You got to be cool. So you're not going to ask your friends, "How do I budget?" You're just going to kind of wing it, which could be disastrous, So they learn how to reconcile. They learn how to account for sinking funds because, you don't have girls, you have boys, but girls' haircuts can cost a lot of money and they don't do them every month. So that's kind of their version of the insurance payment. You got to set aside a little bit every month so that when you go get the haircut, the money is there, right? So,
Yeah.
if you have if your listeners have kids who are in that age, preteen, teen, start, you may not have been taught about money yourself, but that doesn't mean you can't teach them. And
Yeah.
the many schools are starting to learn financial literacy is important. We need to start doing this, but there's really no guidelines. So who knows what each school is doing, right? But they have done studies and they have found there's 3 things that determine whether kids will get the lesson or not. If we just do it, if our financial literacy is like, John went to the bank and put in $1,000 and he earns interest at 10%. How much money does John have? Do you think the kid would really internalize that? No, it's a word problem. It's just a math word problem. It's not anything that relates to their life. But if you give them, hey, this is your clothing money for the month, use it wisely, because when it's gone, it's gone. Then they start like, oh, I better wear this. If I'm going to buy it, I better wear it. I don't wear clothes or mom doesn't buy me clothes that I never wear,
Yeah.
So they start so the 3 things they found is it relevant? So find something in your kid's life that's relevant, that would relate to them. Is it interactive? Are they a part of it? And is it repetitious?
Yeah, that makes sense. I have my own kids, of course, and our approach has always been when they were younger to make sure that they understood the value of money. And one of the things we did is if they wanted a console for Christmas or a gift, or we would say, well, you have to contribute. You have to sell those 5 toys that you haven't used for a year, put out some of the money, and then we'll pay for the difference.
Right.
Right. And then they started realizing then slowly the value of money. And even now, they've been driving for a number of years now. And we used to tell them, don't drive everywhere. You don't have to, you're using up gas. You have to understand that. They didn't care. But the moment we started asking them to put gas in the tank, then they started to be more careful and to be like, wow, gas is expensive. I'm like, yeah, we've been telling you that for a while. So that practical application.
Yeah. It's like
important.
when our kids started, we go out once a week to eat, or we used to, and they would get money at the beginning of the month for their restaurant budget. And, when mom and dad go out to eat, because we got 5 kids. So, sometimes it was everybody's getting water, and as a parent, when you say that, it's like, you feel like everybody's mad at you for that. Okay. They have their own restaurant budget now. And I hear, I'll have the water, like, because they know if I don't spend it here, I can spend it on something else that's more important to me. Right.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I know we're running short on time, but I wanted to ask you, what do you wish you knew about money before you learned everything you learned about money now? What do you wish you knew about money back then?
That it is not as hard to be successful at it as most people think. It's only like 20% knowledge and 80% behavior. And there is a point where you have to be making a certain amount. I'm not saying that, everyone has a problem with management. There is a minimum amount you really need to make to survive. But for many people, it is mostly a management problem. And if they really had their goals nailed down and knew what they were aiming for, it would be a lot easier for them to focus themselves. Like, if they knew, hey, if I didn't do this, I could get to go on this vacation over here. If they could see the trade-off, it would be a lot easier.
Yeah, good point. Now, Rachel, I know you have a podcast. Where can people get in touch with you if they wanted to follow up or talk to you more?
Yeah, sure. I actually am setting up a page just for you. And
Awesome.
your listeners. If you go to rachelmurphycoaching.com/voice, you're going to see a link to our podcast for teens and a link to my book. And I will have some freebies on there, the top 3 books that I recommend for teens about money, and a spending tracker. So if you're like, oh, that sounds like a cool idea, like turning over stuff to my kids, how do I start that? I just made up a tracker where, like, anytime you spend something for your kids, start writing it down. And that'll do that for a while, and it'll give you an idea of how much you really are spending. And you might say, hey, I want to turn this part of it over to them.
And what is your book called?
I Am Not Your ATM.
I love that title. Great. Any final words, Rachel, before we wrap up?
Yeah. I just want to tell people that you can do this. Like, I believe that you have the power to change your financial life. And I remember how when we were so beat down and I just felt so hopeless, and just hearing other people say, you can figure a way out, you can do this, just made a huge difference to me. And because I have been there and come out of it, I feel like I have, the ability to say, you can do this because I did it, right? I'm not somebody who's never been there trying to tell you, oh, it'll be all right. I'm not minimizing what you're going through or what, your past, but I'm saying that you have the capability in yourself to do great things.
Awesome. Great advice. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time.
That was my interview with Rachel Murphy. Whether you were taught about money or not, my goal in having these conversations, as always, is to bring you actionable tips and advice that, if anything, can open your mind to topics that I feel can make a difference in your life or get you to think about a familiar topic just a little bit differently or see it from a different angle. I hope I accomplished that in today's episode. So here's your homework for today. I'm kidding, there is no homework on this podcast. But if I were to give you an actionable item or an action item to take away, it would be this. Set up an automatic deduction, money that comes out of your paycheck and goes into an account sight unseen. Even if it's a small amount of money, and completely forget about it. Next time you have an emergency, you might just thank yourself for having set that money aside. You can find the show notes for today's episode on my website at oumarjang.com/session 42. If you've enjoyed listening to the podcast, please rate it and follow it on your favorite podcast app. This is really helpful for two reasons. One, it helps more people discover the show. And two, it motivates me to keep cranking out more episodes of the podcast to better serve you. Thank you for listening, and thank you for spending part of your day with me today. Until next time, please stay safe and motivated. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Motivational Voice Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and rate it on iTunes. Get show notes and the latest blog posts at oumarjang.com.